I want to do a 700-mile review on this Swft Zip. We've ridden it hard, and kind of like I said in previous videos, I was going to do a torture test of this thing. Hope you're watching, Swft Zip. There are some negatives and some positives in here. I will start out by saying I would absolutely buy this bike again. However, there are some things that you need to be aware of. Number one, the brakes that come with this bike, after a little bit of time, they're not reliable. They're cheap China knockoff brakes, basically. And I know this. I went to grab for them when a car was coming at me, missed. The brake just depressed, it failed. And I went over the curb, fractured my kneecap in 3 spots on the x-rays, had a concussion, and scraped this down to the bone. So that prompted an immediate brake upgrade. I went with the Shimano. I couldn't afford the Dior LXs and all those that are just massively expensive. If you can, I would recommend them. But I went with the Shimano ML200s, and it has been incredible. They bolt right up. One of the knocks on the brake upgrade, though, and if somebody else, feel free to comment if you know how to get the cruise control to work, because the safety off is your brake, right? You hit the brake and cruise control stops. Well, when you upgrade the 2 brakes, there is no safety off. So that's a kind of a caution right there. So I'm not going to be using cruise control until I figure that out. But the upgrade, there's another guy cut off his exhaust thinking he's cool. The brake upgrade was not hard on the front. 2 Allen keys and you just tie it back in to the factory wiring in there. That one wasn't hard at all. The rear was a little different because of the way that Swft has welded this controller up. There's your controller welded in. I understand why they did it for frame stability, so on, right? But it does make it horribly, horribly inconvenient to work on this bike. I'm sure they didn't intend you to upgrade it, but I always intended to. So once I eventually do the rear hub upgrade and go to a 1500 or a BBS02 750 mid-drive I'm looking at, then we'll tack into the, I'll cut this open with a Dremel tool and cut the welds, and then we'll be able to reroute the cable. But for now, with the rear brake upgrade, I went across with 180-pound zip tie from Harbor Freight, basically, and just ran it down the side. You can see where I've tapped in right now, because the original battery on here is a 10 amp hour China battery. It does okay, but you're going to get about 10-11 miles at full throttle. That's it. I mean, it's not fantastic, right? I mean, it's better than nothing. So I had upgraded and got a 20 amp hour, basically China battery. So I have 30 amp hours in here. The most range I've been able to get now is about 70 miles right in there. I can get about 70, not full throttle. I can do about 45 to 50 miles full throttle on this thing, just using it like a motorcycle. And what I did is just tapped in right here. You can watch previous videos, but I went in, took the cover plate off of here. There's a positive and negative terminal in there, and I soldered to it. And then reran the wire here, and it's just a plug-unplug right here. So the knock on this upgrade, and I'm going to look forward to being able to redo this when I get the new hub motor or the mid-drive with the new controller and all that. Then we're going to tap this in a little bit better. But for right now, what I'll do is I'll ride the hell out of this battery, take it off, put it in a backpack, and then just plug this one in. That's it. So, and it's worth the money. I believe it was $275 for this 48 volt 20 amp hour battery, which isn't bad. Delivered to my door off of Amazon. The upgrade on the rear brakes, I know there's a guy who watches the channel here that has the same bike. It was a little bit different because coming out, you'll notice there's a difference there. This does not sit down, it'll bottom out. This caliper will right here. So what I did is the original brakes that came off, they have a bunch of shims and washers on them. I just put 3 of those on there, and that's tested. I tried with 4 and then 3. 3 seats it down. I mean, the brake works fantastic. If you have a Swft Zip bike, upgrade the brakes. You can get this brake set for, I want to say, $59 for front and rear complete setups off of Amazon. I went to my local bike store. I know a couple of the guys in there have been real good to me. I figured, hey, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'll shop with these guys. A little bit more money, but they know me. For liability reasons, they won't modify an e-bike, right? I mean, that's just, and you run into a lot of bike stores that won't do that. For insurance reasons, they won't upgrade more power, change brakes, things like that. They'll sell you the parts. It is at least twice the braking, at least, over the mechanical brakes. I mean, it stops quick now. I mean, you could put yourself over the handlebars with the front brake now, which was something I could never do with the original Swft Zip brakes. The cost on them, it was $39.99 plus tax each wheel, $80. So that's a pretty minor upgrade. I believe the Diors and the LXs I was looking at were $135 a wheel. So a little out of my price range right now. So I decided to go with these, and I'm just incredibly impressed with them. One of the other notable things, I guess, on this, the front shock has been okay. It takes an impact, and I'm glad to have one, because a lot of these moped styles don't actually have a functioning front shock or suspension. That part's been great. The drivetrain, for as little as I use the actual shifting derailleur on this thing, because I really don't, I ride it around like a moped usually, it's been good. Just good basic stuff. I wouldn't change anything really on the overall purchase of the bike. I would buy it again, with the understanding that, yeah, you're going to have to upgrade that battery if you do any distance traveling at all. I mean, if you're on pedal assist with the thing, on pedal assist 2, you can crack 20 miles. I did a previous video on the channel where I did a range test on it, right? You can watch that. But I mean, there's really not that much range on the thing. If you're going around a local lake or a park, hey, great, it works for you. But if you're doing any length of travel, commuting, anything, it kind of stinks for the range. You know, it is what it is. I knew when I bought it, it was only 10 amp hours, right? So with the upgrade, I have 30 amp hours now, so I'm happy with that. The other issue was the headlight. I'm pretty upset about this one, actually. When I first got it, and it arrived, it had a broken clip here. They had these little red clips that go in. It had a broken clip. I couldn't figure it out. And then I looked, they wired it so tight that there was no distance for travel here, and it kept pulling itself free. Now it's completely, it actually pulled the wire free now. So I mean, we're going to have to upgrade the headlight. So that would be something, Swft, if you're watching. I mean, there was no length for travel here. I mean, it was tied in tight. And that was kind of a disappointment. The tail light also went out. Don't know why. The wire is still attached. So I'm going to have to fix the tail light at some point. That's kind of probably my next upgrade, is a headlight, tail light set, and then wire it into the existing bike. I'm almost waiting for either the mid-drive or the hub motor upgrade, because I'll have a new controller then, and I can just run everything at once. So I would say, in unlocking the controller here, I unlocked it, and I do know what the max speed on this bike is. You can get 27 to 29 miles an hour on level ground with a little bit of wind coming into you, not much, with this thing when it's jailbroken. So, I mean, that's about what you're going to get out of this thing. I mean, I think my max speed on the cycling app that I have ever is 30 miles an hour on this thing, right? So, I mean, that's kind of what you get. It's a 500-watt hub motor with a 750 peak, I believe. It is a torquey little thing. I mean, it does okay. I mean, I've started it out on grass and gone uphill with it and all that, and, you know, it lugs and it does it. It'll do it. Just for saving battery, a lot of times, about the only time I pedal is when I'm taking off from a stop, because that's when you use the most energy, is that initial getting up to speed, right? But overall, for the price point, $1,500-$1,600, and I think they're down to $13.99 now. I mean, you can't complain. And it is an absolutely heavy frame. This thing has taken 2 max speed rollover impacts with me on it. And the only damage so far is you can see the scrape marks on the front hub there. And I had to straighten up the brakes. You know, the little brake on the handlebar, and busted the end of the cap loose there. Other than that, I love the bike. The only other, I guess, bitch that I would have is this right here. It came, and it will not stay tightened. I know everybody's gonna watch, put some Loctite on it. I'm gonna end up doing that, but I've had to retighten it a few times. Otherwise, I'll stop, and then all of a sudden the bike's leaning over, right? Because one of these doesn't keep it straight up. Other than that, I mean, I do like the feature. I did extend my mine a little bit, you just flip it over, and there's a little screw in here, and you just take it and slide it to where you want it. And I did extend it a little bit so it sits a little straighter up. But other than that, and a few scrapes, you can see from laying it down and taking the wreck, there is going to be some damage. It's not too bad. There's a little bit there on the impacts. It's a tough bike. It's one of the reasons I chose it over the 73. Number one, I've been able to upgrade all this stuff, add the battery to it, and upgrade both front and rear brakes on this thing. Put on a cell phone holder, do everything I wanted to do to it, and I'm still under $2,000 bucks. So, and it's faster than a Swift, than a Super 73 entry level now, because I have cracked right at 30 miles an hour, which is not something you're going to do on one of those bikes. The upper levels, obviously, the 73s are a whole different story. But I can still add a BBS02 750 mid-drive to this thing for about 450 bucks. I'll be 2,500 maybe all in, and this bike will do 40 miles an hour at that point plus. I do like the frame. I like the way it's designed. It rides nice. It is super solid and steady at high speeds and cornering. I mean, I love the bike. With the disclaimer, the headlights stink and the taillights suck. The brakes are terrible on these bikes when you get them. They will stop you out of the box, but once you put any mileage at all on them, you start hearing the grinding and the scraping, and people know you're coming. I mean, the signs of cheap brakes, right? And they will fail on you. I had this rear brake completely fail to where I grabbed the handle, it hitched, and then came clean, right? Like there was nothing there. And that is something, and it was at a moment that I absolutely needed the brakes, right? Of course it is. So that's something I would say the brakes are a liability on this bike. Spending 80 bucks to upgrade them, it is definitely worth the upgrade. Everything else on here, the seat's intact. It isn't the most comfortable seat in the entire world. I think we're going to get a little gel cover or something like that for it. I'm thinking like purple tiger stripe, like plush velvet, pimp it out a little bit, something like that. But overall, I would buy the bike again with the brake disclaimer. Everything else, like I said, seems to work well. The rear derailleur, I mean, it's a Shimano basic setup, SIS or whatever the model is. It is Attorney TZ that's on here, and the bike does come with a nice derailleur guard, which you can see I've used a few times. Probably saved my rear derailleur. Other than that, it shifts smooth, rides smooth. You do end up ghost pedaling on this thing. So one of the other upgrades I'm going to do, I'm going to figure out how to do it, but we're going to do the chainring. I'm going to go with more teeth. That way, when you're in, there is no way, once you're up to about 15 miles an hour on this thing, I mean, you're ghost pedaling at that point, right? There's very little push left in the thing. So I'm going to go with a little bit more teeth on my next chainring setup, and just do the crank set on it. Main reason I haven't yet is I want to make sure that I'm able to use this still, which is the pedal assist, right? And I know that there's a magnet that's sitting right in here. I got to figure out and pick the brain of some guys who are better on these e-bikes. I'm good with the wiring and the controller and stuff. I'm not sure about the magnet setup in here, and I don't want to lose my pedal assist yet, right? I'm not ready to go full moped yet until I get the mid-drive setup. Either that or we're going to go with a 1500 rear hub motor. But from what I'm looking at, the Newton meters of torque on a rear hub motor, this 1500 is, I mean, I'm looking at like 100 max, something like that. And I want to say it's 140 or 60 with the BBS02 mid-drive. So you get a lot more torque. And this bike is set up and heavy duty enough it can handle that torque. It's one of the reasons I chose this bike instead of a traditional mountain bike, and maybe it's breaking up the hardware a little bit. So overall, I would say I would buy this bike again. I'm not unhappy with it. I am terribly upset about the brakes, though. I mean, that quite literally almost killed me. And it's just some experience with being able to bike, and having ridden a lot of mountain bikes in my life and a lot of dirt bikes, ATVs, I was able to live through it, I guess. But I ended up with 3 fractures in a kneecap, a concussion, and a cut that over a week later is still not healing. I mean, it was pretty brutal. So I would say upgrade your brakes for sure.